about 100, more than 100 youth over there at the retreat, so hopefully everybody can find a comfortable place to sit this time. All right, good morning, everyone. We are continuing our Lenten series called Transfiguration, based on this book called The Elements, The Transfiguration of Elijah. If you haven't purchased the book, I encourage you to purchase the book. Nod your head if you've purchased the book. Nod your head if you've purchased the book. Okay. Nod your head if you've cracked the cover open. If you've opened the cover a little bit. Okay, we have a few people. All right. All right. We're going through, and I promise you, I'm not going to give away anything from the book because, somebody told me that the book is like Ramadan Musalsalat. It's very like I can't wait to find out what's happening next. Okay, so get into it, enjoy it. I promise you, it'll be really, really beneficial to you. Last week we spoke about our being untainted by the world and the innocence and glory in which man was created, and how God had this beautiful design for man, and that God had written a story for man, that man was supposed to be in this deep fellowship with God and connection with God. And we talked about how basically the devil does everything to taint our hearts and take away that innocence, to take us away from what God has intended for you. And you're thinking that but Abuna, that's just like in the Bible. That's just in Genesis. Adam had a few good days and that was it. The rest of everything went lost. But there are people. There are people still. There are adults, and you're going to think about children. There are adults out there that are still really unspotted from the world. They're like children. They have a purity of the heart of a child. And we talk about the ways and the reasons why we become numb spiritually. And I pray that we can reflect and examine these things that happen to us a little bit more. This week, one of the more important things that you're going to find as a theme in the book that affect people deeply in their spiritual lives is the different relationships that they have. There's all kinds of relationships, and believe it or not, we have friendships that come from two different directions. You have friendships that are coming from heaven, that God has sent people in your life to be like a source of blessing to you, to help you direct your mind and your heart to God. And you know who those people are in your life. And you can think back, maybe it was when you were younger, maybe it was when you were a teenager, maybe it's another couple that really has the same mindset. Maybe there's another family that really wants to raise their children alongside of you with these same values, okay? And the other direction is that the enemy has no problem planting bad relationships in your life. All it takes is a bad relationship. All it takes is a bad friendship, or I could say a misdirected friendship. They don't have to be evil. They don't have to be people, you might say, like my friends are normal people, they're good people, they're not evil people, but they could be misdirected. The definition of sin, is off the target. The definition of sin means that we are off the target. And so any relationship that is off target could totally take your life completely off track. And so our goal is to cultivate an environment where your soul is comfortable in its element of being in fellowship with God. And so this environment that you create helps you be in fellowship with God. And I want you to think about how much your environment defines who you are. How many of you worry about the kids that your kids hang out with? Because you know that their environment is going to define who they're going to end up being. And you can think about these new guys that your husband started to hang out with. Those people you're worried. Why? Because you know that this environment is going to define who this person becomes. But like I said, there are people that are sent to us as gifts from God, and there is the opposite. I'll tell you a story. When I was young, I used to have last week I was sharing guys these stories about when I used to go to the monastery. And I had a special experience. I used to go with my best friend. We used to go every weekend. We'd find a ride. We were like 11, 12 years old. We'd get a ride to the monastery from Friday to Sunday, and we'd just spend 3 days almost every month. And I have a special experience that I shared with this friend. And I feel like me and this friend, we were able to share heaven together. I'll share this special experience for you. Every night in the monastery, they pray the Vespers evening service. And I remember telling the bishop of the monastery, me and my friend, we had been there for 2-3 weeks already, and we're like, okay, can we just miss this one? We want to do our own thing. We want to do our own prayers in the desert. We want to go and sing praises to the saints, and we want to just go experience this monastic experience. And the bishop paused for a second. He's a very, very holy man. His name is Ambakaros of thrice blessed memory. He said, okay, but take it serious. We said, okay, Sayyidina, we're going to go. And we went out to the desert. 11, 12-year-old boys. We're going, and I have the cymbals, and we're singing, and we're high-pitched voices, and my voice is cracking, and it's a disaster, right? And we start singing the hymn that many of us love is J9, which is Have Mercy. Have mercy. But we sang it in Coptic. 2 young boys were singing J9. And all of a sudden, like I said, 2 squeaky voices. We finish the part, and usually like the priest says it, and then the congregation responds. So we end J9, and all of a sudden we hear, Eleus. What is that from? So if you've ever been to the monastery in California, it's all desert, surrounded by mountains. It's at sunset. It's heaven on earth. The angels were singing with us. We heard choirs of angels singing in a different, the way we do it in liturgy is that when it will say Janainan, and then the people respond, Elai Sunimes. And we heard the choirs of angels singing. And me and him had this special bond. And I remember we left this situation, we ran to the bishop, Sayyidina, guess what happened? He's like, shh, I know what happens in my monastery. He said, keep it in your heart. Keep it in your heart. And I remember me and my friend that day, we made a pact. That's it. We are going to be the next Maximos and Domedios. We are going to be that's it. God has opened the door. Heaven is calling us, okay? And we felt like this was something that we wanted to cultivate. Because this is the place where we felt like our souls are going to grow. I want you to think about those relationships in your life. You see, there's a time in Elijah is the character of the book, in high school years, when Elijah's parents start forcing him to go to church, you have to go to hymns class, and he goes through this phase where he felt like his parents were the enemies of his life of entertainment. That they were going to be the enemies of his fun, even though Elijah was a good boy in the story. But his parents are forcing him to do things that didn't seem very fun. I want to stop here for a second. There is a sickness in today's society and in today's generation, young and old, where we are addicted to entertainment. Do you agree with me or not? How many of us, our kids will say, okay kids, we're going to do this, and what's the first thing they say is, but that's not fun. I'm like, sorry that out of the 24 hours of the day, you might have 8 minutes that aren't going to be fun, right? And everything has to be fun. What's the first thing you do when you're bored at home? Pull out your phone. I can access any basketball game, any news video clip. I want to laugh today. I want to grow spiritually. I want to see what's going on in China. You can do anything, and you can be entertained 24/7. To the point where you might be honest with yourself and discover, I cannot remember the last time I sat by myself without pulling out something that's going to entertain me. Do you agree with me or not? When was the last time you just sat and heard the quiet? We're addicted in this generation to entertainment, which leads us, okay? Entertainment is not evil in and of itself, but the abuse of it is. The abuse of it is that everything has to be fun. Everything has to be perfect. Even like sometimes, we'll go visit a family. The family doesn't have kids our kids' age. And the kids say, but Dad, it's not going to be fun. We say, you know what? You're going to go to be a blessing. We're going to a place. Your job today is not to have fun. You're going to a place to be a blessing to others. To serve. To play with the little kids and make them have fun. Encourage them. Be older brothers to these kids. Because I think that we all have been blinded by the enemy to chase entertainment. All your money wants to go to what? Something that's going to be entertaining to you. You have two TVs in your house, now you need 3 TVs. Now we need a TV in the garage. We need one in the bathroom just in case between the shower and whatever. it's happening, right? And all of a sudden, Best Buy has a new TV sale. You're like, I need one. You have one in every square inch of your home, but you just need it because I need to be entertained. God forbid I go to the basement and I need to watch something, and I can't. You see, entertainment. Oh, sorry, I didn't. Entertainment evolves into a love of pleasure to fulfill the lusts of the eyes, the mind, and the flesh. This is why the church tells us to beware of the love of pleasure. You see, entertainment evolves into a love of pleasure. You become addicted to pleasure. And pleasure takes so many forms that beyond social media and beyond going out to eat, now I just need to have pleasure. So now it's going to come through eating. It's going to come through looking at things. I want to see the latest fashions. I want to see the latest jewelry out there. What is the coolest car? What is the upgrade for my Tesla? I want to find out all of these things that can what? Satisfy the eyes and the mind. Even the love of knowledge. There's a season in Elijah's life where he becomes obsessed with knowing. And he's reading philosophy, and he's reading all kinds of things. And he just has this love of knowledge. And now, everybody knows everything. I'll go to a house visit, and I'll open the Bible, and I'll share something in the Bible. They say, you know what? And they'll quote 9 different priests what they taught about this Bible passage. They've heard it all. So much information coming in, and it's a shame. You're like, but Abuna, those are spiritual things. No. There needs to be a time where I come to say that God is going to be my source. God is the one that directs my life. We're going to get into how this leads to this. Now I want to introduce a few characters in the story without ruining the book, I promise. So in 7th grade, Elijah found a young lady named Martina that he felt very drawn to. Okay, He feels very connected to her, and he's getting to know her, and they're sharing and connecting and bonding, asking each other questions. Then every question she asked him, his answer was, do you guys remember this part in the book? Me too, right? Oh, one time I used to go to the park in Clifton. Hey, me too. My family used to go to Sizzler after every, you guys know what Sizzlers is? Raise your hand if you know what Sizzlers. That's like the Coptic family joint where you eat after a graduation, engagement, a birthday, Pope is enthroned, whatever it is. You go to Sizzler as a family because it's a free buffet. It's very cheap. It's all you can eat, okay? And so every time they're speaking with each other, the answer is, hey, me too. You see, there is within the human soul such a hunger for belonging. The one can begin little by little to shed who they are in order to extend the feeling of fellowship. I want you to think about your life right now. I want you to think about how much of you has changed. How much of your identity has changed because you are trying to extend this feeling of bonding with somebody. So say, oh, I like to go to, I like basketball. Hey, me too. I like ballet. Me too. Come on, you don't like ballet? You ever see sometimes when like a couple, they go out with another couple and they're trying to, like they want to make a friendship with this other couple. And so one of the couples like, hey, we like that too. And he's like, no, we don't. Like they're just trying to fit in. And they're losing their identity as people for the hunger within themselves to belong. Now there's good belonging and there's bad belonging. We're going to talk about that right now. It's such a simple statement, but it's filled with so much danger that I will shed my identity. I will lose my identity. It's like if there's a new law working in your soul. Something is starting in your soul. One that is ever so, this is actually a quote, one that is ever so slightly away from one true's self. It's a different law. It's a law inside of you that is so different from one's true self. And innocent Elijah found himself at the crossroad over and over in these days. He says, every inauthentic me too was like a single leaf falling from his foliage. Every single time he said me too, something from his own identity started to what? Change. One leaf after another started to fall from the tree. I want you to think about yourself right now. That need for fellowship is actually stimulated in this love of like entertainment. Because I want to belong. And I always want to be entertained. So I want to be with people that are going to entertain me. And I'm going to find things that they like. And I'm going to belong to these things that they like. And I'm going to participate, even if it's completely against God himself. Think about how many times you've done this. I'm not going to tell you how many intimate relationships. I'm not going to talk about specifically this relationship. But how many intimate relationships come in 7th grade, right? You found the love of your... sometimes I get the youth, they come and they tell me, Abuna, she's the one. I'm like, you haven't even hit puberty yet, man. Like, we pray together, we read the Bible together, we both like hymns, we both whatever, and they know the lingo. And I'm thinking, like, how do you know that you found the one? He found the one because he found somebody that he belongs with. Somebody that he feels accepted with. Somebody that, and what happens? Little by little, he starts to change. There's also a character in the story, if you're reading, who's going to play a very significant role throughout the series, throughout the book. And he kind of just creeps into the story, and his name is Uncle Onsi. Nod your head if you know who Uncle Onsi is in the book. Uncle Onsi is one of the uncles of the church. He's got a heavy accent. He's a very, very loving guy. And he's speaking to this young boy, Elijah, at church. Very simple. He's a taxi driver. He's got a very pure heart, a love for God, a love for the saints, who prayed like Elijah would look at this Uncle Onsi guy praying in liturgy. And he would just see like Uncle Onsi is like lost with God. He began to admire Uncle Onsi in the book. Okay? And he always showed Elijah this beautiful love and acceptance. And he's this taxi cab driver from the congregation, okay? And at some point he told him, I want you to know something, Elijah. You belong to heaven. I want to remind you, Elijah, you're one of us. He never understood what that meant. Uncle Onsi would come and tell little Elijah at church, Elijah, I want you to remember something. You're one of us. And he says, you're not the only one who talks to Mama. Mama is St. Mary. She loves you very much. And so does Mary Mina. You may have forgotten him, but he hasn't forgotten you or left you. And he's trying to tell Elijah, don't lose who you are. You are one of us. You're from heaven. Elijah, don't forget. You don't belong here. And my message to all of you, and you might be thinking, who are you thinking about in the congregation? Who are you referring to? I'm thinking about each and every one of you. You belong to heaven. You don't belong here. This is not your final destination. Do you have any clue what it's like to be a citizen of heaven? He kept on telling him, heaven is waiting for you. You will one day be one of us. Don't forget my words. You're going to be one of us. I want you to understand this concept. Look what Jesus says. We belong to heaven. John chapter 15, verse 19. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Let's move on. John 17. Jesus is praying to the Father. God the Son is praying to God the Father. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I want you to think about all your goals in life. Your goals in your friendships, your goals maybe in your marriage, your goals with your kids. What do you want them to be? You want them to go to the best university, right? there's beautiful kids from the church that go to the best universities that have lost Christ completely. They're brilliant, and their parents should be so proud of their grades, but they don't know Christ. Because they don't know that they belong to heaven. And so any wind takes our youth here and there, and they do anything. One of them says, he gives me a list of, his confession, and he's like, that's it. I'm like, you didn't leave anything out. I'm like, that's everything. Illinois. Like, what else is there? Murder? There's nothing else. You forgot that you're not from here. I'm telling you this because the little arguments that we have. Abuna, is this okay or is this not okay? Does it belong in heaven or not? Abuna, what can I do, when we go out? What can I do with my boyfriend? What can I, all these wonderful questions. Ask yourself, you belong to heaven. Well, what should I do? What's my financial plan? Somebody asked me recently, Abuna, can you help me do a financial plan? Invest in the kingdom. That's where you're from. Invest in the kingdom. You're like, Abuna, that's a good strategy to get people to tithe. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about invest in the kingdom. That when every dollar I have, I think about how can I build the kingdom of God? How can I use it to witness to others? How can I feed the hungry? How can I clothe the naked? How can I be from another planet? I'm trying to remind you of these things because we're not of this world. We don't belong to this world. We need to be in fellowship with the same kind as us. You see, if you are not from this world, you need to be in fellowship with people that are also not from this world. You say, that's where it changed in my life. That's where I lost it. I thought that I could just mix in. In the Old Testament, the Israelites were not supposed to marry from any other nation. They were not supposed to mingle with any other. They would say, other nations would come and say, can we help you build your temple? They say, no. We're going to build this temple on our own. There's no mixing. I'm not talking about like hanging out with people from of different races or different cultures. I am talking about heaven and not heaven. You say, I'm far from that. I'm so far from that mentality. Listen to what St. Paul says. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. You know what a yoke is? They used to bring oxen. An oxen would carry, you'd have two big oxen or big bulls, and they put this yoke on their necks. And if one was taller than the other, or one was strong, it would be carrying all the weight of the yoke, because this yoke is dragging some type of trailer or some type of... So, carrying all the weight. So St. Paul says, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? He's saying, what does Christ have to do with the gods of the world? Nothing. He has nothing to do with the gods of this world, but you're mixing. Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God. And God has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their God and they shall be my people. Whose people are you? You ask yourself who you've given your allegiance to. Your friends? The mentality of your friends? Maybe the friends, they're from church and they're nice people and I've known them for 20 years. But they forgot that they're from heaven. And very slowly, you will forget that you're from heaven as well. Something that we need to consider. Let's look at some friends in the Bible that were not very, very good friends. There's this passage in 1 Kings. After Solomon, David had died. Solomon took over. Solomon was the wisest man in the world. Solomon had built the temple of God. Israel was prospering. They were amazing. Solomon dies. This is the setting. Solomon's son Rehoboam comes on scene. He's the king. And he's trying to figure out, okay, what do I got to do to run this government? How can I run this nation? It says, and they spoke to him saying, they're giving him advice, if you will be a servant to these people today, and serve them and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he rejected that advice, which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. So Rehoboam sits with these nice, wise elders, and says, what do you guys think? How should we govern? They say, serve. Have the spirit of a servant, and you'll win these people. Doesn't like it. He brings his friends. All right, guys, what do you think? We're in charge of the kingdom. What do you think, boys? What should we do? This is what they said. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you should speak to this people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. Good job, Rehoboam. Way to take charge. You're in charge. His friends told him, you should do this, Rehoboam. Don't let people talk to you that way. You're the king. And that was the beginning of a place in history where the kingdom of Israel split into two kingdoms. Israel and Judah. He was in charge of Judah, one tribe, and a little tribe called Benjamin. And the other 10 tribes had nothing to do with Rehoboam. And that was the end of Israel. You see, be careful of the people that you've allowed in your heart. Be careful, because there are people in our lives that lead us with a divided kingdom within the heart by their bad advice. I want to ask you today, do you have a divided kingdom in your heart? Somebody told you, come on, oh, you're a saint today now you're going to be like a saint and you're going to act like you're better than us. And some people do this to people from the church. You're a saint now. You're like, I thought we were all saints. Oh, don't give me that spiritual stuff. Oh, don't give me this. And these people divide this kingdom right here. A little bit for God and a little bit for the world. A little bit less for God, a little bit more for myself and my pleasure and my entertainment and my love of self. Perfect example, Rehoboam. You see, listening to people in our lives that are sometimes planted by the enemy. I want you to look at the people in your lives that you're close to. Could it be that they were planted by the enemy? Don't look at your spouses. Don't look at your spouses. Okay. Could it be that the enemy has brought them to you and said, you want to belong? Here's the perfect person for you. You see, God loves me. He knows that I need friends, and He sent me these nice people. And little by little, the heart became divided. Whether you want it or not, you are a servant over God's kingdom, the heart. And who you let into this heart is so important, because they will divide that kingdom. And if they take a part of the kingdom and give it to the devil, this kingdom is going to be under war for a long time. And if you're reading the story, you're going to see that's what happened in the life of Elijah. And there's friends that don't have wisdom, give the wrong advice, like in the time of Job. Job was going through a very difficult time. Job was suffering. He had lost all of his family, all of his belongings. He became sick. Job was going through, a living hell. And his friends came to give him advice. And they said, you know what, Job? All this whining and all your suffering is because you must have done something wrong. Is that what Job needs to hear when he's broken and dying and he's lost all of his children and all of his belongings? Maybe there's some accuracy in that. But it was the wrong time. Wrong words at the wrong time. And so they're making Job feel like, maybe it's you. You're not so righteous. Maybe you have some type of hidden sin going on in your life. But they weren't doing it to lift him up. And there are people in your life today that are making you not wise. We just did a retreat on wisdom for our grad group. Because more than ever do we need our adults and our future families to have wisdom, not street smarts. Your street smarts aren't going to get you anywhere. wisdom from God. You need wisdom from God to know what is a trap from the devil. Whether to go, not to go to the right and not to go to the left. Not even 1 inch, but to go straight. God is the one that directs our steps in those things. The enemy plants people in our lives that will slowly turn us away from God. So I want to ask you, what are the standards of the people that you have chosen to surround yourself with? Think about some of the standards that you've chosen. What are they? What are these? I want you to think about Delilah and Samson. Samson found this beautiful lady named Delilah. And little by little, Delilah, because he's in love with her, because he wants to belong with her, because he's so connected to her, Delilah says, Samson, what's the secret to your power? And he says, and he starts making up stories. And it's, he starts braiding his hair. He's like putting his head on her lap and she's playing with his consecration. She's playing with his devotion to Christ, and he's allowing her, just play with my hair a little bit. You can't lose one hair, Samson. No one can touch your hair, but the enemy sent him a Delilah. What about Jacob? Jacob went and he worked 14 years for Rachel. What happens when he meets with Rachel and he ends up living with Rachel and his father, and her father, Laban, his uncle? They run away from the uncle. What does he bring? What does she sneak in with the family as they run away from her father? Anybody know? Household gods. Jacob, what happened to you, man? Jacob, the one that heard all the promises of God and the blessing of God. She let in all of these statues and all these idols with you? It's because maybe God didn't send you this Rachel. This Rachel wasn't from God. That's why that's why he went through so much. Think about the standards of the people that you have chosen to surround yourself, and why. Be honest. Often we choose people based on worldly standards. Successful people because I want to be successful. They say, hang out with people that are better than you, right? And so I go hang out with rich people because rich people are better than me and they got more money than me. How can I get a nice house like you do? How can I get a nice car like you do? How can I get a pretty wife like you do? How can I? And we start to do what? We start to think these are the standards. Surround myself with popular people that maybe one day I'll be admired. Maybe some people will actually start to like me. Maybe I'll be loved. Maybe I'll be surrounded with people. And these are the standards in which we choose our friends. Whatever happened to, real virtue? Somebody that is honest. Somebody that has integrity. Somebody that says, no, I'm not doing this. I always tell my boys, I say, but everyone is doing, or everybody's saying, or everybody's talking this way. And I say, they're looking for one person, one gada that's going to say, no, I don't need to. I don't want to. And you shouldn't either. They're looking for one strong person that's going to stand and say, no. And they can't find it in the world. Can your coworker see it in you? Can your family see it in you? Can your friends see it in you? Can your siblings see it in you? Can your children see it in you? Can your parents see it in you? What do they see? The book talks about this concept called philotia, which is the love of self. And I want you to think about every friendship that supports the love of myself. Think about the friendships that support the love of myself, encouraging me to do what feels good, not what's right. Come on, you're going to get the best high. You're right. It'll make me feel good. That's the friend I'm looking for. Hey, when we go drinking, we have a great time, we laugh. When was the last time you laughed like this? It's been a long time. There you go. Love of self. The enemy starts to tell you to love yourself. Get something bigger and fancier and nicer and more expensive and gold and diamonds and make yourself feel good. Love of self. Where are the friends that tell us and that show us the opposite of self-love? Take a minute and examine the self-love that is stimulated in some of your friendships. I want you to think about some of the friendships that are stimulating you to just love yourself. And I know nowadays in a lot of the modern day self-help books, they tell you should have self-love. That's from the world. There's a difference between self-love, like understanding what God has given me and understanding the potential that God has created in my life, and self-love, pampering yourself, make yourself feel good. It's addicting. And when something feels good, you don't want to stop. And that's why people find all kinds of addictions because of this love of self. There's this beautiful quote that says, when one's identity is attached to someone else's reaction or perception of you, it becomes an identity roller coaster. I want you to think about the people that you've been trying to impress. And because you've been trying to get this acceptance from others, and they like you, and oh, this is a nice couple, and these are good people, and this is a nice woman, and you're getting them, and they like your identity. And all of a sudden they discover something they don't like about you. Now what happens? You lose your whole identity. I've changed everything to impress you, to get you to love me. And then they say, but you're kind of snobby. I don't think we're going to deal with these people. And all of a sudden, your whole identity is changed in a second. When I cannot impress the people around me, I lose my identity. I want you to think about, there's a character in the Bible, in the book. Also, I want you to think about this. Why does church become boring for us? Because it's focused entirely on the worship of God. You want to know why sometimes you get to the point where church has become boring, and it's become boring for your kids as well? Not because church is boring. For 2,000 years, people have worshipped like this. All over the world. People have worshipped from the Catholic Church, to all over, the people have worshipped like this. But why is worship boring? Because it actually focuses on the worship of God, not the worship of myself. So if nothing is going to happen to me, and nothing is going to help me or make me feel good, no, I want out of this. Self-love. Be careful of what you've planted even in your children, or your friends, or your family, or your this mentality. I should be worshipped. There was a convert that came to Orthodoxy, and he says, I love the Coptic Church. He says, because I walked in, and I walked into a liturgy, and Abuna was facing that way. I walked into my everyday non-denominational church, and I'm the focus. The pastor's coming, and I'm the focus, and everything is about greeters, and here's a thing of coffee, and here's this, and make me feel good. I'm not the focus. God is the focus. God is the direction of my heart. And so our ungodly friendships often lead us to focus on the worship of ourselves. Let's look at some of the godly relationships that kept people in the path that God knows will nourish us spiritually. There's a beautiful verse in the book of Sirach that says, allow many to be at peace with you, but allow 1 out of 1,000 to be your counselor. Allow many to be at peace with you. All these nice people here, your top 500 friends in the church, be at peace with them. But 1 out of 1,000 is your counselor. Not just anyone's 2 cents goes in your heart. You need people that are godly. People who know and are sure they are not from here. That when somebody comes and speaks to me, they remind me, we're not from here. Our citizenship is from heaven. We don't belong here. So the advice that I'm coming from you is not the perspective of the world, it's the perspective of heaven. I want you to think about this. Think about Jonathan and David. David had just defeated Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And the people are saying, Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s. Jonathan, what are you thinking? You're supposed to be the king. Don't let them praise David like that. You're the next king. Next chapter, 1 Samuel 18. Jonathan goes and he meets David. And he takes off his robe and he puts it around David. And he makes a covenant with David. He says, when God makes you king, remember me and my family forever. What sacrifice. What love of the calling of David. And he was protecting David to the point where he put himself at risk in front of Saul, his own dad. Saul threw a spear at his own son because he was defending David. He sacrificed for David because he knew that David was in the will of God and David should be in this way. Not, Dad, I don't know what this David guy is, and is he going to take our kingdom from us, Dad? No. God's kingdom. We're from God's kingdom. We belong to God's kingdom, and David is the man for God's kingdom. Loyalty. Think about loyalty. Think about people that are like Ruth and Naomi. Ruth was the the daughter-in-law of a woman named Naomi. After their husbands had died, Naomi's going back to her land. And Ruth said, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. I will leave everything to be with you, to support you. Look at this woman. This loyalty that you don't find anymore. Oh, we'll sell anybody out now. We'll sell anybody out. Why? Because they're hurting me. There's no loyalty. They're hurting me. So what? They're weak. You should be carrying your friends. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. That's what the Word of God tells us. Somebody who has the love of God and others. There's a girl in the story named Esther. She shows up on the scene. She's this young, beautiful lady that moved from Egypt, has this deep love of God and the saints. And she's always speaking to the saints. And she's always in touch with the saints. And she's a beautiful young woman. And God introduces actually Elijah to this Esther person. And he begins to see the beauty that is in her. And there's something unique about this friendship. Something he noticed. You see, godly friendship feels the complete freedom to disagree and be themselves. One thing that Esther never told Elijah was, me too. She was okay. She felt free to be herself. If you can't be yourself, if you can't be a member of the kingdom, if you can't say, I'm from heaven, I'm not from here, and you have to say me too in every line when you hang out with somebody, you're the wrong person. You see, Esther started to realize this freedom to be yourself. The freedom to be authentic and real. Not real from the world, real of who you are. You are from the kingdom. You're not from here. You see, you want to know why he fell in love with this girl named Esther? Is because the love of her life was Christ. He saw this beauty in her because she was in love with Jesus, that he felt like because she loves Jesus, I'm totally in love with her. And this is what I want us to see in our friendships. That when I find somebody who's in love with Christ, not nobody who knows how to talk the talk. Everybody read the same book. Every guy, right, when we take out a young lady, they tell you, open the door, tell her nice words, get her a flower. Everybody read the same book about Christianity. We know how to talk the talk. I'm talking about somebody who is in love with Jesus. Somebody who's willing to even die for Jesus. Are you finding that in your life? In the book Song of Songs, there was a woman named the Shulamite who was dealing with the king. And she's describing her love of the king, who is Christ himself in the story. And she says, I am lovesick. She says, I'm crazy in love with Jesus. You yourself should be lovesick. But find friends that are lovesick. Find friends that are lovesick. And then I want you to learn how to be friends with the heavenly. The Bible says, therefore we are also surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Be friends with the heavenly. Remember I told you, you need to find people that are from where you're from. You need to find people that are also from the kingdom. Lately, God has been opening up my mind and my eyes to see people that are so connected with the heavenly. And they speak to the Theotokos, St. Mary, all the time. And every decision, they say, St. Mary, come with me before I go. I'm going to a problem. Pray for me. Be in touch with the heavenly. I want you to undo the Western world and the way the Western world has presented the saints. The church is 2,000 years old. We received it from Christ and the apostles. Don't let somebody undo, like you talk to like dead saints and whatever. The saints are around us everywhere. They're around, and I was just around somebody recently, like Pope Carlos appears to him all the time. And Pope Carlos speaks to him and tells him, go tell this person that God has heard their prayer. And he'll go and tell them like details that nobody else would know, because God is leading him. He's in touch with the heavenly. And when you're in touch with the heavenly, you say, this is where my soul belongs. Recently, a young lady who's been going through a lot of turmoil and confusion in her life, she says, literally, the Holy Virgin comes to her in her dreams and tells her, don't worry, you're going to get through this. Hold on a little bit longer. It's going to pass. 3 times the Holy Virgin came to her in her dreams, telling her, you're not going to pursue the heavenly. The heavenly is pursuing you. Guys, I want you to understand something spiritual right now. Forget the PowerPoint and all this stuff. The kingdom is here. Kingdom of God is here. The saints are here. I've been in places where somebody said, okay, and I've smelled it. Like I'll be in a room, and this person who was connected with a heavenly person freezes. What's wrong? Baba is here. Who's Baba? Baba Krolos. And all of a sudden, the priests that know this person, they're like, smell. And poof, the smell of incense and the smell of the spices that we give out in these saint relics. I'm looking around, what the heck is going on? And Baba is here. And he tells somebody, give me the shell, one of the priests tells him, give me your shell. And he gives him, and he puts it on his head, this guy that sees Pope Krolos. He puts it on his head, and then he gives it back to Abuna. And it smells like the smell of incense. He said, because Baba put his hand on my head. So anything that Baba touches, Pope Krolos, he leaves this oil and this incense. So he put it on his head, and he gave it back to the priest and said, Abuna, here you go. We all smelled it. And it's like deeply, it's a scent of heaven. You say, okay, that's cool, like some saints. That's for all of us. Be connected to the heavenly. You are not from here. Be connected with those that are not from this planet. Abuna Yusuf As'ad was praying a liturgy one time, and he saw all the saints. And there was a kid that was moving around, and the deacon was like, why did Abuna pause? And what's going on? And the deacon was kind of like yelling at a kid, and Abuna Yusuf As'ad is praying. He said, Lord, open up this deacon's eyes to know what is going on. And all of a sudden the deacon in the liturgy opens his, like God gives him the ability to see what Abuna Yusuf As'ad is seeing. And the place is filled with the saints in the heavenly. And he's like, I'm sorry, Abuna. He says, when you stand in liturgy, you don't move. You're stepping on an angel's foot. Like, the heavenly are everywhere. But we are so lost in our little world, and we forget that we belong up there. We're from there. All this distraction that you're in, all this place where you're investing your time and your money and your energy and your friendships, you're from the kingdom. The kingdom is here. But say, Lord, open my eyes that I might see. Maybe you've experienced the heavenly before. I remember when I was first ordained, there was a convert. God gave her the ability to see things, to see heavenly things in liturgy. And I'm following up with her, and she said, Abuna, I got to tell you what I saw in liturgy. She said, when you were going around with the shoria, with the censer, these little angels were holding to the back of your tunya. And as soon as you went to the altar, those angels let go. And I remember asking a very saintly man, another monk in the desert who sees these things. He says, yes, because the angels on the outside of the altar are different than the angels on the inside of the altar. So the angels on the outside don't go in. They stand right there because there's an angel that accompanies the sacrifice, and there's angels for the altar. And there's people that are seeing things. Last story. Sister Verena, a woman that served in Kenya, in the villages of Kenya. She was running all of our mission by herself. She was literally this tall. Her hand was literally like this big. But she was a lion. And all the people in Kenya would come to her with their problems. Sister Verena, please, we're having a problem in our marriage. Can you come sit with us? We live on top of the mountain. She was so busy, and she pulls out a picture of Pope Krolos and says, just ask him. And she goes off on her business. And they come back. A week later, Sister Verena, thank you for sending Abuna. What do you mean? Abuna, the one in the picture, the one you sent us. He came to us on the mountain. He fixed everything. And he speaks perfect Luya. Luya is the tribal language on the mountain. The saints are here. Befriend the heavenly, that your mind would reach this way. Don't let anything bring you down. Don't let the world weigh you down and make you foolish. When you read the book of Elements, you're going to realize the church sometimes goes in the wrong direction when we try to be cool or hip or entertain or make it this really hip church. The church is a holy place. It's the house of angels. You come and you see God face to face in the church. And that's where we as a church have to always go. We're not a hip church. We're a church that follows the kingdom. We're a church that wants to be part of the kingdom. And all of these are members of the kingdom. We're not from here. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Let's stand up and pray.